Most people like to know when their loved ones have landed safely after a flight. But what if you never got that call? Instead, you found out that the flight had completely disappeared. That's what happened to the Malaysian flight MH370. Follow me down the rabbit hole to find out more. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another beautiful episode of The Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Dani, and today we are talking about the Malaysian flight that disappeared, flight MH370. On March 8th of 2014, just after 1 a.m., Malaysian Flight 370 disappeared from its flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. On board the Boeing 777 were 227 passengers and 12 crew members. Farik Hamad was the first officer and the one that was flying the plane at the time, and he was only 27, but this is his last training flight before he would be fully certified, so he needed these hours actually flying the plane to get completely certified. Zari Ahmad Shah was the pilot in command. He was 53 and was obviously the most senior he was one of the most senior captains in the Malaysian Airlines, like, total, and he handled all the radios while Farik flew. And this was a totally common practice, although Zahari's calls were a bit weird. It was just weird. There's some just weird things, right? So at 1:01 a.m., he radioed in that they had leveled off at 35,000 feet. This was weird because typically they would radio about leaving an altitude, but not necessarily about arriving at an altitude. At 1:08, the plane crossed over the Malaysian coastline and was heading in the direction of Vietnam across the South China Sea. Again, Zahari radioed about being at 35,000 feet. It's odd that he would like re-radio and be like, hey, we're still at this altitude. Like, if you're at that altitude, if you haven't left, then yeah, we're just going to assume that you're still at the same altitude. At 1:19 a.m., the plane was just leaving Malaysian air traffic control and was entering Vietnamese air traffic control. The controller at Kuala Lumpur Center radioed, quote, Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. Zahari answered, good night, Malaysian 370. He did not read back the frequency, as he should have, but otherwise the transmission was like completely normal. So what I learned in the Navy is, like, you say, hey, you, it's me. So, like, hey, podcast listeners, this is Dani. Here's my message. And then my podcast listeners, you guys would be like, hey, Dani, this is podcast listeners. And then you would say your message, right? And when you received a frequency or something like that, you would repeat it when we're flying. You want to repeat that frequency so that way you make sure you got the correct frequency, because, like, what if you heard a number wrong or something? I mean, things can go wrong all the time. So you definitely want to be like, hey, you, it's me. Here's the frequency that you gave me. So in that case, he would have been like, hey, air traffic control, this is Malaysian Flight 370. We're going to contact Ho Chi Minh at 120.9. And then, like, that would be like the end of the transmission. He did not do that, which is just weird, especially for being one of the most senior pilots in the whole airline. That's like, he should know better, and he's training this guy who's on his last flight, and this other Farik should have been like, hey, like, you need to repeat the frequency. It's weird. I don't know if there's much to look into there, but it is odd, right? So anyway, good night, Malaysian 370 were the last words heard from the flight before the plane disappeared from radar screens. 5 seconds after crossing into Vietnamese airspace, the symbol that represented the transponder dropped off the screens of Malaysian air traffic control. 37 seconds later, the airplane disappeared from secondary radar. So we're going to talk about secondary and primary. What we what we primarily use is the secondary radar. The primary radar is like an older, like outdated technology that we don't typically use, but it's going to come into play. So just know that typically when they're seeing planes on a radar, like a radar blip you would see like in a movie, basically, they're seeing secondary radar. And that's what they completely dropped off of, was the secondary radar. Due to the plane crossing the airspaces, it took air traffic control 18 minutes to even notice that the plane was missing. This is because the Malaysian airspace like didn't have to worry about the flight anymore because the pilots were just leaving Malaysian airspace. They're entering Vietnamese airspace. They hadn't quite checked in with the Vietnamese air traffic control yet, so they didn't know that they had entered. They should have because of the radar, but they weren't on radar anymore. And Malaysian air traffic control was like, oh, they're not our problem anymore. They have moved on to Vietnamese airspace. Well, that's why it took so long, because it was right in that perfect like little window that they didn't notice that this plane had dropped off radar completely. Officials did try for hours to get a hold of this plane, and all the calls, everything they sent out went completely unanswered. Nothing. Nothing in response. Search and rescue teams basically should have been called within an hour of the disappearance, but weren't called about the missing plane until about 6 a.m. That's more than 4 hours after the plane disappeared from radars and stopped returning calls. 4 hours. They're like, it'll happen eventually. Like, we're going to find the plane. We don't need search and rescue. But, like, just as a person, if my loved one was on this plane, I would be pissed if I found out that the air traffic control didn't even like attempt to find them, besides like calling out to the radios over and over, which if they're not answering, they're not answering. I understand, like, you want to keep trying, but like, get somebody out there to start searching. Like, go find my loved one. Go find somebody. Like, it's just weird to me that it took them so long to call search and rescue. It's odd, but whatever. I mean, maybe there's something there that maybe there's not. I don't know. Early efforts mostly like focused on the South China Sea because that's where the plane was supposed to be. However, things get a little weird. Before we go there, 34 ships, 28 aircrafts, and 7 different countries didn't turn up any sign of a missing plane in the South China Sea. So this is when they decided they must be looking in the wrong place, right? Like something must be off. Well, radar and satellite analysis was completed to chart the course of the plane and like kind of better like figure out where was this plane, where was it going, and what they found was so crazy. Sorry, I tried to be dramatic there. I don't know if it worked. After the final message was received from the plane, it appeared that they basically changed course. Or at least dramatically veered from the original course. They first made like a sudden turn to the southwest and flew back over the Malay Peninsula. Then they banked around the island of Penang before heading northwest up the Strait of Malacca and out across the Andaman Sea. I'm going to see if I can find like a picture that outlines this flight path after secondary radar has completely fallen off. This is what was found from primary radar. So I'm going to see if I can find a picture that outlines this flight path. I'll post it to our Instagram. So if you're curious about like what this plane was doing, I mean, isn't everybody? Go to our Instagram. You can see a good solid picture. Anyway, this part of the flight took about an hour. So like them doing all these weird like turning and banking, like all these weird maneuvers, basically it took about an hour, and suggested that it wasn't like a standard case of hijacking, because typically like a hijacker wouldn't do all these weird maneuvers, right? It also wasn't like any accident or pilot suicide that anyone had ever seen before. And they'd seen, I mean, obviously they study these things for a living. None of these things seemed like normal. Like, these aren't things that actually happen when somebody's basically in distress. It was found that the plane, because it took so long to maneuver and go in all these different directions. That's what was odd, is the length of time. It was found that the plane then cruised on autopilot for hours before running out of fuel and falling into the Indian Ocean. Or so that's what we've assumed, right? So this new search area is thousands of miles away from the original search area, which was in the South China Sea. So of course, if this is where the plane landed, if it was in the Indian Ocean, not the South China Sea, we've wasted hours looking in the South China Sea, and so much money and manpower. We put a lot of time and effort into the South China Sea, and now we're finding out like, oh, this plane might actually be in the Indian Ocean instead of the South China Sea. And they're not close by any means. All of this was found out because the plane's primary radar was still linking to different satellites and intermittently connecting to Inmarsat, which is a commercial vendor from London. And they use Inmarsat. I remember using it in the Navy. Lots of people use Inmarsat for, lots of different things. I'm not going to go into technicals here. But Inmarsat technicians monitored the data that was collected from the satellites and could determine approximately like where the plane basically would have ended up. And in the article I found, like, it's pretty dense information. I didn't add all that into this because trying to explain it, I think, makes it really difficult. If you want to know all the technical things that the Inmarsat technicians were doing, you can definitely go to our show notes and click on the sources. Anyway, it was determined that around 2:40 a.m. the plane turned south, and at that point, when the turn occurred, the flight was just north of the northernmost island of Indonesia. It appears that the plane was headed basically towards Antarctica. Of course, like, they would never get there because they would run out of fuel well before they ever made it. So that's why, like, we were kind of looking in the Indian Ocean area, and later on, the Australians kind of get involved, and that's why they get involved, is because, like, they're more familiar with the area, they have more resources, blah, blah, blah. After 6 hours, the Doppler data showed a steep decrease, like really, really quick, as much as 5 times greater than a normal descent rate. And it normally takes, I was just on a plane, like maybe 20 minutes to descend. So imagine completely descending in 5 minutes.
Did you know that over 40% of Americans have a hard time swallowing pills? So when it's time to take your vitamins, large capsules and pills are out of the question. We know that gummy vitamins exist, but they're full of sugar, they get stuck in your teeth, and they only contain a fraction of the nutrients you need. Luckily, Easy Melts has discovered the ultimate vitamin sweet spot. Vitamins that melt in your mouth, taste like a treat, and are packed with nutrients ready for absorption, all without an ounce of sugar. For a limited time, Easy Melts is giving listeners a free 3-month supply of vitamin D3 with their first purchase. To claim your free D3 vitamins, visit try.easymelts.com/spring24. That's try.melts.com/spring24. Say goodbye to the old way of taking your vitamins and say hello to the easy way. Menopausal and perimenopausal women, listen up. It's time to take control of your health and comfort, and Winona is here to help. Winona is a telemedicine company for menopause care who believes that your symptoms are real, important, and deserve to be taken seriously. And for many women, this starts with hormone replacement therapy. Winona's HRT is made with plant-based, bioidentical hormones rather than synthetic ones, so it better aligns with your body to offer relief from hot flashes, weight gain, and other uncomfortable symptoms. 80% of women who use Winona find relief within just 90 days. So, what are you waiting for? Get started today. Visit buywinona.com today to start your free visit. With free shipping and the ability to pause or cancel at any time, your path to wellness has zero obligations. Use code SPRING24 at buywinona.com for 25% off your first treatment plan. That's BYWINONA.com for 25% off. Winona. Menopause care made easy.
Or 4 minutes. Like, quick. The plane was diving basically straight into the ocean. They descended so fast that experts say it was probably like shedding components on the way down. Like, because of the data that was received, we know that this plane was going down quick, fast, and a hustle, man. Like, it was going. So you have to imagine things are flying off left and right. And this will come back into play because some of these components, or I don't know if it's these components, but some things from the plane start washing up on beaches. And are they the components that potentially were flying off this plane. I don't know. And this was not an attempt to land the plane in the water, like in any controlled manner, because like if they were trying to land in the water, they would definitely like descend slower and try to like kind of cruise into the water. They did not try to do any of that. They were going down quick. The impact should have broken the plane into basically 1 million pieces. Although they don't know exactly where the plane would have hit, they do suspect, based on data, that it would have hit in the southern Indian Ocean. Australia was the closest country and was well equipped to handle search in the ocean, so they went right to work. Whereas like Malaysia wasn't really equipped to handle like basically an in-ocean search. Australia was, and they are very friendly with other countries, so they're like, yeah, no problem, we'll take it from here. They also found no trace of any plane or any wreckage at all. And you would think that if a plane hit the water, there would be 1 million pieces that it broke into all over the place. Well, they didn't find anything. Of course, the time lost looking in the South China Sea could have been costly for them because officials were worried that they wouldn't be able to recover anything from the wreckage or the plane's black box, which that's what they always want to recover. Anytime any plane goes down, they want to get the black box to like basically like see what happened. After 2 months of searching the surface of the ocean, they turned to the deep water searches, and that's basically where it remains today. I mean, all these years later, 8 years still, and they haven't found this plane. They've barely found any pieces to it. You do have some do-gooders. The beachcomber Blaine Gibson. Anytime you look up this conspiracy theory or what happened with this Malaysian flight, you get some story of Blaine Gibson, who basically like left his home in California, sold his late mother's home to go and scour the beaches where the Indian Ocean may have washed something up. So it was multiple countries that he was scouring the beaches of, and he basically like took it upon himself. He's like, well, if officials aren't going to do it, well, I'll do it. So he went and he scoured beaches and he went to multiple different countries looking for debris. He basically like was a private investigator of sorts. He would go to like the local tribes and ask them, where do things typically wash up? And then he would go and look and scour beaches and try to find any clue that the Malaysian flight was somewhere. I don't know. Anyway. So some of these conspiracy theories are pretty crazy. There's a bunch of them. I found 9 of them. I'm sure there's more, but I found 9. So we're going to go into all 9. And some of them I don't have a lot of information on. Some of them I have a lot. So let's get into it. So basically the first one is aliens are involved, which that's everyone's go-to, right? Like, we can't find any pieces of it. We don't know where it went. So the aliens must have taken the plane. Well, around the time of the plane's disappearance from radar, there was like a quickly moving plane, very close, like Mach speeds, like quick, and also several other strange anomalies. And so they're attributing these things to alien movement in the area, which means that maybe the aliens were tracking the Malaysian flight. Why? I don't know. Like, what did they just wanted like 227 test subjects? I don't know. But that's one of the theories. And honestly, like, it's not a bad one. I think when in doubt, blame it on the aliens, because they're always down here doing weird things, you know? The second conspiracy is that the passengers are still alive. I mean, it's been 8 years, but this conspiracy is basically from some of the family members that say that they have called their loved ones' cell phones, and the cell phones ring all the way. Like, they don't act like they're just going straight to voicemail. They ring. Some of them say that their loved ones are still active on instant messenger, like their instant messenger accounts. You can see like the little green dot that they're still active online. I mean, if for whatever reason they went to another dimension, they could still be active online. Their phones could still be working. I mean, likely that they took their phone chargers with them on the plane so they could charge them in another dimension. I don't know. It's not that far-fetched, right? There is the Snowden connection. This one says it's from a Reddit user that suggests that maybe the governments were involved either the Chinese or the American government. Why? Because on board the aircraft were 20 U.S. chip guys, which were basically free-scale semiconductor employees that were working for a global leader in embedded processing solutions. And the flight just like goes missing with these 20 people that know things about things, like important things about things. The Snowden papers implicated the American IBM technical storage executive for Malaysia in the papers he provided. And the Reddit user goes on to say, quote, what, and excuse me, before we get into that, apparently, like how Snowden said, like the American government, the NSA, is spying on their own people, right? We learned about that a little bit with the Patriot Act. It also, apparently, they were also spying on the Chinese and collecting their data as well. The NSA was collecting all that. And so Snowden, when he blabbed, he let loose that, hey, we might have been collecting on China. So this Reddit user said, quote, what would 200 lives be to the Chinese intelligence community for of the chance to find out exactly the depth and scope of our intrusion, unquote. And I mean, he's not wrong. The Chinese will do a lot to learn a lot about a lot, you know, like they're just like, they're out there being shady. I should do some Chinese conspiracy theories because they're shady over there. Although I probably won't find them, and if I do, they'll probably come kill me. So here we are. There's also the other side of this. The Americans got wind of the chip guys and that they were going to be arrested when they landed in Beijing and did something to basically interfere before the Chinese got a hold of these guys. It is said by this Reddit user that they took measures to sanitize the plane in flight before it got to its final destination. So maybe the Chinese government made the plane disappear because like they're curious. Maybe or they just like took the 20 people and killed all the rest, got rid of the evidence, like did whatever, right? Maybe the American government was like, well, we can't take our chances, might as well get rid of it, and they got rid of it. I mean, this one seems to have a little bit of meat to it. Then you have the Iranians kidnapped engineers theory, which kind of goes along with the free scale semiconductor employees. An Iranian national was responsible for buying 2 tickets for this flight for passengers that have stolen passports. So they shouldn't have been able to fly. Well, the reason for the tickets was for the passengers to extract technological intelligence from these free scale semiconductor employees. The UFO Digest writer Tony Elliott says the plane ended up in East Timor, due to a U-turn the plane made right before falling off all radars, for real this time, like primary radars and all that. East Timor would have been the nearest friendly Muslim country, which is why they would have taken the plane there. So there just seems to be something about these free scale semiconductor employees. Like they know too much or something's going on with them. I haven't really figured it out, but my thoughts are that I'm leaning towards them. Whether it's the Iranians, the Chinese, the Americans, something's going on there. I don't know what it is. But that's kind of where my brain's spinning. Another theory is that the passengers were taken to Pyongyang, and this one's a little harder to pin down because we do have some evidence, right? So it would be really hard for the plane to fly at such low altitudes to go unrecognized by radar to get all the way to Pyongyang, which would have been the same distance as Beijing was. So like they would have had the fuel to get there, but it's just harder to wrap your head around because they have the evidence of the plane flying in all these different directions and doing all these different things. And then it just went to, but why? Like, I don't know. I have more questions about that one. But it was a theory that came up. I wanted to give you guys all the information, so here it is. The information. This next theory makes me giggle. And I don't giggle at a lot of theories. I mean, I giggle at all of them, but also I'm like, maybe. This is the 404 error theory. So this Boeing 777 was the 404th Boeing 777 made by Boeing. So this theory states that the HTTP error we're all very familiar with, meaning like whatever was not found, may have been taken too seriously when it comes to this plane. They do relate this theory to the Illuminati. I don't see the connection, but like it was in my research called the Illuminati theory, but to me it's more like the 404 error theory, because if you're going to take it like, oh, the 404th Boeing, it had an error, it's not found. I don't know. I mean, maybe they're just being funny, but also it's like that would be a silly reason for that plane to disappear. Plus, there's been 404 planes made of multiple other varieties. Boeing has made 404 planes of 737. So, like all different kinds of planes. So like for the 777 to disappear just seems like far-fetched and weird. It is a cool theory, though, just like putting those pieces of the puzzle together. I don't know who did that research, but they tried. They tried really hard. The next theory is the new Bermuda Triangle, or maybe the Bermuda Triangle moved. So the new Bermuda Triangle is right off the coast of Malaysia now. So right in the flight path of where this plane was going to go is going to go right through this suggested new Bermuda Triangle. And we've all heard the stories of the Bermuda Triangle, and depending on what you believe about it, I mean, this theory may hold some weight. Maybe this is why the plane dropped off the secondary radar but was still picked up on primary. Like the plane went to like another dimension or something, and that's why it turned around and went in different directions. Like all these directions seem odd to us, but maybe like the plane was literally just trying to get a hold of us, but it went to another dimension or whatever, universe or whatever, right? Through this Bermuda Triangle and now is lost. And that's actually the second time I've mentioned that. So maybe that's where my brain is headed. Maybe it's a combination of all these conspiracy theories that I'm like, maybe I think too much about conspiracy theories all day long, because it's just a little weird. The one of the last two, the eighth theory that I found was that it was taken to Vietnam, and this is kind of like a terrorist attack type theory. So this theory says the plane was hijacked and forced to land in another country, and since it was so close to Vietnam, that's like where it made sense to land it. And the passengers are all being held as like hostages at an unknown location, and the plane will eventually be used for another 9/11 type attack. I mean, it doesn't explain the primary radar pings. It's definitely weird. And then the last one is the black hole theory, which again, like the second dimension and all these different, I might be onto something here. So it is said that a miniature hydrogen bomb was detonating using an iPhone app, and that created a black hole, and the plane was sucked into it. I mean, all decent theories. But at the end of the day, like, we have a plane that's completely vanished. We have like one or two pieces of like scraps that have shown up on beaches, and people like they check the serial numbers to make sure that this piece of metal or whatever part of the plane it is actually did belong to MH370. But so far, like, no substantial pieces have been found. No, like, there's not like a big wreckage anywhere. It is very odd that a plane completely disappeared off the face of the planet, and we have no evidence to show that it was ever even like a real thing. Like, just us thinking about it. Did we all make it up? Is this like a piece of the Mandela effect that we're like, well, there was a flight, right? Like, you remember a flight? I remember a flight. I don't know. It's odd. It's odd. It's all a little odd. So, that's Malaysian Flight 370. I have a lot more questions about it. I'm gonna leave this all up to you. Please tell me what you think. Tell me what you what you think about this. What theory do you believe? Do you believe a combination of theories? Apparently, as I talked through this and explained this all to you, I talked myself into multiple different theories. So maybe I need to write it all out and make my own theory, which is maybe a combination of all these theories. I don't know. But of course, until next time, my friends, I will see you all soon. And make sure you stay skeptical, because when you don't, things sneak up on you when you're not paying attention. The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Dani Mercy. We thrive on listeners like you. If you like what you're hearing, please leave us a rating or review wherever you are listening. Follow us on Instagram at rabbit.holepodcast. Special thank you to Zakar Valaha Music for our intro.